we're reacting to 2 Henry episodes. The second one is the one I promised a certain someone. And then I will be doing the best or worst episodes on Friday. Wait, today's Friday. I meant Saturday. Sorry, my bad. I am just waking up this morning. So anyways, let's get started. This first one's Henry Goes to the Hospital.
Henry had been grumpy for the past 2 days. Sir Stephen Topham Hatt sent Thomas to take part in the great railway show in York on the mainland, and the big green engine grew jealous.
Okay.
He puffed into a station with the express. But on this day, he saw a nurse standing on the platform. "Hello there," she said. "Are you going to Wellsworth?" "We are, Mom," Henry replied. "Oh, very good. Today's my first day as a nurse there, and I don't want to be late." "No problem, Mom," replied the driver. "We'll get you there in time." "Thank you," replied the nurse, and she walked away to find a seat on her train. For the next few days, as Henry puffed into the station, he would always find the nurse standing on the platform waiting for him. Soon the nurse began to warm up to Henry, and when there was time they would usually have a chat before it was time for them to go. Henry liked the nurse. "My name is Nancy Retford," she said to Henry, "but you could call me Nurse Nancy." "Very nice to meet you, Nurse Nancy," greeted Henry. Soon Henry had forgotten to be grumpy about Thomas going to York, because Nurse Nancy's presence at the station had always made him smile when they picked her up to take her to Wellsworth. Then one morning, Henry saw that Nurse Nancy was nowhere to be seen. "Where is she?" Henry wondered. "I'll go and ask," replied the driver. He'd asked the station master, but he hadn't seen her. And then he asked a ticket collector at the station. "No, I haven't seen her," he replied. Then the driver could see that the signal went down to show that the line was clear. The guard blew his whistle and waved his green flag. "But where's Nurse Nancy?" said Henry as he puffed out of the station.
Poor Henry.
"Perhaps she's on holiday, Henry. Nurses do have them too, you know," said his driver. So the train left the station without Nurse Nancy.
So sad.
Later it began to rain, and a little girl was riding her bicycle down the lane. She was on her way back from a friend's house and was looking forward to going home away from the rain. As she rolled through a town, she saw a dog darting across the road. "Oh no!" she cried. She braked hard and managed to avoid the dog, but she braked too hard and fell off her bike and landed hard on the road and began to scream in pain. Everyone came rushing by to help, and one of those people was Nurse Nancy, who was out shopping. She took the girl onto the footpath so she could be safe from the road, and looked over her leg to see what damage was done. "I'll call for an ambulance," said one of the townsfolk. The ambulance was called, and the girl was placed in the back of it. As the ambulance made its way to the hospital at Wellsworth, there was an even bigger problem.
"Oh no!"
"Oh, drat," called the driver. "What's wrong?" asked Nurse Nancy. "The ambulance is caught in some mud, and we can't move. We could call for another, but who knows how long it will take for it to get here," sighed the driver. Then Nurse Nancy heard a whistle in the distance. "Henry," she said. "What about Henry?" wondered the driver. "Henry's express service usually stops at Wellsworth, so why don't we try and have him take Amy to the hospital?" Not a bad idea. Station's not far. I'll go and tell the station master." And he rushed away. He told the station master, who agreed, and then told the signalman to hold up Henry's train while they bring Amy and Nurse Nancy to the train. Just then, Henry neared the station, still feeling grumpy that Nurse Nancy wasn't on his morning train. "I've lost my nice nurse. I've lost my nice nurse." His driver tried to assure him, but he saw the signal was placed in danger, and they had to stop. They waited and waited. "What's the hold-up?" rumbled Henry crossly. "I don't know," replied his driver. "Perhaps there's a flood on the line. But surely someone would have told us by now." We've been held up for far too long." Finally, the station master came towards them. "We need your help, driver," he said. A little girl called Amy had fallen off her bike and broke her leg, and the ambulance that was to take her had its wheels stuck in the mud. "Can you please let Henry take Amy to the station near the hospital?" The driver pondered and then smiled. "Of course," he said. "We're on our way to Wellsworth." Henry smiled. Soon the ambulance men arrived with Amy on the stretcher, and, to Henry's surprise, Nurse Nancy. "Hello, Henry," she called, and for the first time that day, Henry beamed with happiness. Amy was soon placed gently in the coach. "Don't worry, Amy," said Nurse Nancy. "Henry will soon get you safely to the hospital." And she sat next to Amy to make sure that she was comfortable. When everything was ready, Henry set off, but very carefully so as not to make Amy's journey uncomfortable. They arrived at Wellsworth, where another ambulance was waiting for them to take Amy to the hospital. Nurse Nancy smiled as Amy was soon placed inside. She then went towards Henry. "Thank you very much, Henry," she said happily. "You are a really useful rail ambulance." Henry blushed bright red, and then he said, "If you don't mind me asking, Mom, why weren't you on my train this morning?" "Well, today was my day off, Henry. But I was in the same town as Amy and saw that she needed help. After all, I am a nurse. I'm sorry for not telling you about it the other day." "That's all right," replied Henry. Soon the signal was down and Henry steamed away. "Goodbye, Henry," called Nancy, and Henry gave a peep from his whistle as he puffed away to try and make up for the lost time.
I'm sure they'll understand when they hear about what happened. Is that it?
Then the ambulance rolled away to the hospital. It turned out in the end that Amy had luckily sprained her leg instead of breaking it. Her leg was bandaged up, and she was placed in a wheelchair for only a few days until her leg was feeling better again.
Aww.
Nurse Nancy rolled her out of the hospital, and in the distance, Amy heard Henry's whistle. "Was that Henry?" she asked. "I want to go home on his train so I could say thank you to him."
Close the bathroom
"Well,
door.
you have to ask your mother," laughed Nurse Nancy. "Here she comes now." And rolling into the car park was Amy's mother. Amy was sad. "What's the matter, Amy?" she asked as she strode towards her. Then Nurse Nancy told her that she wanted to go home on Henry's train. The mother smiled and said, "Why don't we go to the station and see him?" And that made Amy beam with happiness. Nurse Nancy agreed too, and after helping Amy's mother put her daughter in her car, she boarded Amy's mother's car and they went on their way to the station. Meanwhile, Henry had made up time with his train from earlier and made it to Wellsworth on time with his early evening train. He then saw a car rolling into the station car park. He saw that it was Amy, her mother, and Nurse Nancy. Sir Stephen was on the train as he was making his way home for the day. Nurse Nancy came towards him while Amy and her mother went to see Henry. She then told Sir Stephen all about today. Soon both she and Sir Stephen went towards Henry as well. The big green engine smiled when he saw Amy, Nurse Nancy, Amy's mother, as well as Sir Stephen. "Thank you for helping me," said Amy. "It was fun riding to the hospital on your train." "It's my pleasure," replied Henry. "Perhaps when your leg is better you can ride on my train." And that made Amy more excited than ever. "We are here to serve the public," announced Sir Stephen. "And Henry here shows how useful our engines are in times of dire need. Henry, you are a really useful engine." Henry was very proud. Soon the signal was down and Nurse Nancy boarded the train. "But what about the hospital? I've already checked out for the day, Henry. I was only in so I can help Amy today." "It is still my day off," she chuckled. So did Henry. The guard blew his whistle and Henry puffed away. "Goodbye, Amy," Henry peeped. "Goodbye, Henry," called Amy. Nurse Nancy waved too from her train. "Goodbye, Amy. Look after your leg. I will, and thank you for helping me, Nurse Nancy. I'll never forget it. And soon, Henry glided out of the station on his way again.
Is that it? Is that it?
Amy hadn't forgotten Nurse Nancy's help, and even
it's
years
not.
after her leg had gotten better, she began to understand nursing. And as she had gotten older, she began to learn and study about nursing, and by the time she became a young adult, she had become a fully fledged nurse at Wellsworth Hospital.
What?
Henry pulled into the station one day and saw Amy on the platform as he pulled up with his train. Well, look at you, said Henry happily. You've certainly come a long way since the day I had taken you to the hospital. Indeed, chuckled Amy. But you can call me Nurse Amy. Nurse Nancy, who was now retired, along with Amy's mother, were all there to see her off. And as she boarded the train, Henry puffed grandly away with a brand new nurse on board his train.
Aww. I didn't realize that Amy was okay. Okay. All right, on to the next one, shall we? All right, next is Haunted Henry.
However,
Let's go.
it became popular among hikers and explorers, so the Fat
What is it
Controller
playing?
thought it would be a good idea to restore it. He set to work, but not all the engines were thrilled.
Is this the line that runs by what used to be Gorsaflin?
Yes, that's the one by Haywin Lake. Of course, as you know, the hamlet is gone, but the station is still there.
Or what's left of it? But no
I
engine has
agree.
gone there in many years. Is it still safe? I mean, the trees have been dead since when I last went down that line in 1930.
Ooh, spooky. Don't worry, we're going to remove all of those trees before the line reopens. Now, which one of you would like to take the train there tomorrow night?
Well...
I'll do it, sir. Edward seems to be too scared of dead trees in the dark.
No, I'm not.
Very well then, Henry.
And with that, the Fat Controller left.
Edward.
Why are you so
Go through
freaked
junk
out
drawer and
by just the
organize it.
mention of
Sorry,
that line?
guys.
Nice bookshelf.
I'm not freaked
out
out.
recycling.
I just think it's a bad idea to reopen that line.
Henry laughed and left the yard. That evening, as Edward puffed into his shed, he found out that Henry had told the other engines about him.
Hello, Edward. Are you scared of the dark?
No. Henry's just telling you rubbish. I'm not scared of the dark. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to go to sleep in my very dark shed.
Henry, Gordon, and James snickered. Thomas was cross, and so was Percy when he came back the next morning. They were both alone in the shed with Edward. They decided to find out what all the gossip was about.
Edward, if you don't mind me asking, was there something that made Henry think you were scared of that old line? Like, did something happen?
I suppose I can tell you two, but don't tell the others.
We won't.
Right then. That line is haunted. I went on it many years ago and can assure you that I saw something strange.
Thomas and Percy were puzzled.
What are you talking about?
It's a bit of a long story, but I guess I better tell you.
And this is the story Edward told. The year was 1894. The island of Sodor had been part of the United Kingdom for many centuries, but there were still a large number of native Sudric speakers, most of them farmers in rural areas. Just off of what is now the Peel-Godred branch line, there was a small hamlet next to Haywin Lake called Gorsaflin. It was inhabited by Sudric farmers and was served by a small station. They would load their goods into trucks, and the train would take them to be delivered across the island. For many years, the area was peaceful. That is, until a deranged man named Guto Quildroadal became the mayor. He was a native Sudric extremist who hated the British rule of Sodor. He was quite an intimidating man, always dressed in
Hang on.
black, and he
Still
turned
here.
the once peaceful farmer hamlet into what was essentially a radical Sudric cult. He often got into
What?
trouble with law enforcement due to his promotion of violent resistance and garnered a fearful reputation with not just local farmers, but the government as well. Eventually, he and his minions decided that the town was no longer under British rule, and they would ban any outside influence. This included blocking trains from coming in.
Okay.
A simple attempt to negotiate with the authorities led to a gunfight, and although no one was killed, the police gave up.
That's my kitty.
The government of Sodor decided that the only way to solve the matter was to set up a night ambush and take him into custody.
What?
The night they picked happened to be one with lots of mist, which gave them the advantage. They snuck onto the line and made their way towards the village.
There we go.
Wildroadle was standing guard at the station. An owl hooted, and then he began to hear what sounded like an engine puffing. He grabbed his rifle and leapt onto the tracks. What happened next is up for debate.
Oh, hang on, guys. Sorry, guys, I don't own these.
Is up for debate.
There we go. Uh-oh.
Some say he pointed his rifle at the oncoming train, shooting at it, while others say he was shot dead in cold blood. But whatever the story, Quildroadle was shot dead, and the town was invaded by British soldiers. No one else was killed, but many were arrested that night, and those who weren't left the village. Quildroadle's reign of terror was over, but the area never fully recovered. When the Peel Godwin line was built, the small loop branch line around the lake was used less and less, until by around 1930 it was completely abandoned. And no one knows why, but the trees started to die off, and now the station sits in a dead forest. But what does that have to do with ghosts?
I'm just about to tell you.
Yeah.
I went down that line one night in 1930 with some workmen, and there was a strong
Janice
mist.
Mona, Chris Daly
As I
review
approached the
update.
station, an owl hooted, and suddenly we heard gunshots. We called out, but there was no reply. Suddenly, the station light turned on. We didn't dare keep going, so we went back. The next day, they searched all around the area, but there was no sign of any bullets. It was when I heard the story that it all started to click. Whenever an owl hoots, the mist rolls in, and legend says that when the mist's about, there's a ghost about too. The ghost of Guto Quildroadle.
Thomas
Whoa.
and Percy were speechless. But do you actually believe there's actually a ghost there? There could be several explanations.
I hope I was wrong, but it just seems like too much of a coincidence. I don't want to believe in ghosts, but there's something strange on that line. I've never ventured on it since. Needless to say, I'll give Henry a warning this evening.
Later that evening, Henry was preparing to take his train to the old line. It was a moonlit night.
Whenever that owl hoots, a mist rolls in. There's a legend that when the mist's about, there's a ghost about too. Take care on the old line, Henry.
What? Pah! Stupid bird!
Henry set off with his train,
He warned
ridiculing
you!
what Edward had said.
Owls, mist, ghosts, what rubbish! I say Edward's going soft to the boiler. I mean, there's no mist!
Indeed, there was none, that is, until he reached the old line. Henry suddenly felt very uneasy. Suddenly, he saw something.
What's that?
It's an amber lamp. That means proceed with caution. Someone must be trying to get our attention. Who's there?
No one replied. Henry crept slowly forward until he stopped by a tree with a sign on it.
Stop it.
Upon closer inspection, they could see that it said, "Beware of the viaduct."
Huh? No one warned us about that before. And look, the signal's red and the gates are closed. And there's a coat hanging on the tree. But where's its owner?
Henry looked around and saw something that made him go pale.
What's that? There's a light in that station!
What on earth?
Ghost! Edward was right!
Just then, they could hear a faint voice in the distance. They couldn't make out what it was saying, but it was very haunting.
Something very strange is happening. I think it's best we go back.
So do I!
And Henry left as fast as he could. The Fat Controller was getting ready for bed when the butler came in.
Who would be calling at this hour?
It was Henry's driver, calling about the events at Gorsaflin.
I'll investigate this in the morning. For now, take Henry back to the shed and go home.
When Henry arrived back at the shed, the engines noticed he was as white as Harold and shaking all over. Bless me! What happened, Henry? Henry told them about what had happened. There was a long silence. Gordon finally broke it.
First the rain, then an elephant, and now a station. Whichever will you be afraid of next?
Probably just some children fooling around. Those little rascals can be nasty. But Henry didn't think so. It had been very real to him.
Well, I'm not going back on that line again.
Not again!
The next morning, Henry's driver and fireman were talking to a workman while waiting for Sir Topham Hatt.
Lucky you didn't cross it last night. If it was damaged, you would have most certainly had a fatal accident.
Organize bookshelf.
Yes,
No.
but we don't
Take
know
out
who
recycling.
warned
Well,
us.
that's stupid. It's just, I wish
Just
it wouldn't
then,
go off when
Fat
I made
Controller
Go through
showed
junk
up.
drawer and organize it.
Now then,
Take out
tell me
recycling.
what happened last night.
So the driver did. The Fat Controller was surprised.
If the viaduct was damaged, then I would have been made aware. But I'll send some workmen with the necessary tools this afternoon.
As Henry's crew and the Fat Controller went to discuss it further in the station, Gordon snuck up behind Henry and gave a big whee! Henry jumped.
Look out! It's the ghost!
Knock it off!
Gordon chuckled and puffed away. Just then, Henry saw Douglas talking to a strange man in a handcar. Henry had never seen this man before. The man made a very strange laugh, and then he left. Later that day, as he was resting in a siding, he saw Douglas come back. Henry asked him about the strange man.
Why, that's old Bailey the Fogman. He's a bit of a strange fella. Goes on and on about the environment and how he's friends with nature. Sorry I can't talk more. Must be off.
If I remember correctly, wasn't
Just
he
then,
the one
Henry's
at the
crew
viaduct?
came back.
Good news! The viaduct has been repaired, so we can take our train along the old line tonight.
Do we have to? Can't we do it during the day?
No, because the workmen need their tools first thing in the morning. Besides, we were told that lots of teenagers hang out around that area, so what we saw last night was probably nothing more than people fooling around. It'll be alright to take it tonight.
But Henry didn't really want to. However, when night fell, he was sizzling nicely and forgot to be afraid. Nevertheless, he decided to push his train this time to protect him if something did happen. Suddenly, an owl hooted, and then Gordon thundered by.
Look out for the ghost!
Oh, look! Henry spooked! If Henry was any more of a scaredy train, he'd rattle his
Be quiet! I'm not scared.
But he was. The trucks teased him all the way, but stopped as soon as the fog came down.
Don't tease him now, will ya?
As they approached the same area, they saw the amber light again.
Oh boy, here we go.
Then, unbeknownst to Henry, the gates closed by themselves, and the signal went red. The trucks had seen everything, and they were spooked too.
Faster! Faster! There's a ghost about!
And they surged forward, pulling Henry.
Stop! Stop!
The train crashed through the crossing gates just as a mysterious figure watched Henry go by. Henry was now scared for dear life,
I hope that viaduct's repaired!
but they never reached it. Ahead, was a landslide blocking the line. Henry braked as hard as he could, but the trucks hit some of the rubble and plunged into the ravine. Henry managed to stay on the rails, but was very shaken up.
Wow, that was a close one. Hold on, I think whoever was operating the gates must have been trying to warn us.
What's that?
Coming towards them was a figure on a truck.
It was the
As
fogman.
it got closer, the crew realized who it was. The fireman laughed. Well, what do you know? That's our ghost. It's Old Bailey the Fogman. Old Bailey was very cross.
I tried to warn you about the viaduct, and you acknowledged it. But when I warned you about this, why didn't you pay attention?
We're sorry.
The driver explained what had happened. Old Bailey laughed.
Oh, I've heard that old story millions of times, but I've worked on this line for years, and I assure you there ain't no ghost. In fact, I believe the sloppy repair work on the viaduct put the already unstable ground to the brink, and there was a landslide shortly before you came through.
Henry was confused.
But Edward told me about the paranormal things he experienced when he went down the line a long time ago. Like the gunshots.
You know, my grandfather said people used to hunt illegally here at night, and I bet that's what Edward heard. Even nowadays, this place has been overrun with crazy people trying to find that ghost. It's a good thing this place is being restored.
Indeed. Is there anything we can do to thank you for saving our lives?
Well, you could tell Sir Topham Hatt that I'd like to operate that old station. My grandfather operated it before he was shoved on by
my bed and
Gilberado
clean
and
my
his
room.
cult.
Make
and
my
I'd
bed
like
and
to
clean
restore
my
it to
room.
what it was
Guys,
before.
clean nightstand.
It was his dream. If you let me, I promise I won't spook Henry again.
Well, that would be much appreciated.
Old Bailey's wish was granted, and he met with the Fat Controller a few days later.
This is an old but a classic.
Given the rather ominous event that happened here a long time ago, I think it would be better to turn this area into a nature preserve and monument.
That's a great idea. The station can be a stop for hikers to get on and off and explore this historic area of Sodor. It will be a peaceful getaway.
Although I will say, we could remove the dead trees.
Looking at some of the wood, I think there was some sort of fungus that killed them off. Given that the bushes have come back, I think whatever that fungus was has been long gone. We'll bring back the natural beauty and harmony that the farmers intended before Gudul Chiradul infected it with his terror.
That's awesome.
The old station building was knocked down, and a brand new one was put in its place. The dead trees were all cut down with seedlings being planted in their place, and the railway was repaired.
Good.
Old Bailey was very pleased.
Excuse me.
And on opening day, Henry and Edward came to the celebration.
When I was a child, my grandfather used to tell me stories about life running the station as a young man in the 1880s, and how peaceful it was. That is, until Gudul Chiradul and his cult had to show up and infect the land with his bigotry. He was forced out of the station by that cult, and when he returned, the station never recovered. He was devastated, and I want to continue his legacy by bringing back what he was never able to. This wildlife preserve is a place where people can come away from the stress of industry and find peace. I've wandered this area for many years, often being mistaken for a ghost. But from now on, there will be no ghosts roaming around here.
Except for you, of course.
Well, thanks. I'll try not to be too spooky in the future.
Let's hear a hearty thank you to the friendliest, ghost on the island.
Everyone cheered, especially Henry, who was the happiest of all.
That was an awesome episode. I'll see you all in the next video. Adios, everybody.